started. My name is Jeannie Jaworski, and I am the Director of International Affairs here at Nova Southeastern University. And we're here for a CPT presentation curricular practical training. Everyone in the right place?
Yep.
All right. So just to make sure that I'm trying to give information that's as relevant as possible to each of you, would you mind telling me who you are and what program you're in? Great. I'll pick on you again first.
Okay. I'm Abimbola Minowa. I'm in the master's program of accounting, actually from Nigeria. Yes, so, and I'll be done. I'll complete my graduate program in fall next year.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. I'm Marlon Johnson. I'm from Jamaica, and I'm doing a master's degree in information security and assurance. Well, it's changed now, so it's information assurance and cybersecurity.
Okay.
Right. I should be completing this program in fall too, 2019.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is that the one in the College of Engineering?
Yeah.
And Science?
Yeah.
Hi everyone, I'm Christian and I'm a freshman undergrad for bio.
Where are you from?
Trinidad.
Hi, my name is Sam. I'm from Denmark, and I'm currently doing an MBA here at Joe.
Which concentration?
International business.
Great. And when did you finish?
2 years.
Okay.
So I just
Started.
started. Yeah.
Great.
I'm England, I'm from Norway, and I'm undergrad studying
Finance? When did you finish?
finance.
Okay. Here.
My name is Ujjwal Patel. I'm from India and I'm a public health student in Masters. I just started
You
in
just
fall.
started. Great. And last
Hi, my name is Ashley. I'm an MBA student, and my communications management. I finished spring of 2020.
Okay. Perfect. All right. So I think I heard 2 undergrads. Everyone else is at the graduate level. Is that correct? No doctoral students in the room? Okay. All right. So to get started, this is what we're going to cover today. We'll talk about what CPT is, how one is eligible for CPT, the rules that govern CPT, the difference between paid and unpaid, and what is training versus volunteer work. We'll talk about the authorization process, the importance of full-time versus part-time CPT, and what impact CPT has on OPT, optional practical training, as well as the CPT application process, and then plenty of time for questions. I don't mind questions coming in throughout the presentation. Feel free. Just note that if I know that we're going to cover it in a little bit, I might just ask for you to hold on to it and then give me a chance to get to it, and then we'll make sure that we got to the question, okay? All right. So to get started, we will talk about defining CPT. So the part in quotations is the actual regulatory language. So it is an integral part of an F1 student's established curriculum. And this is what allows them to engage in experiential training in any type of required or optional internship, externship, practicum, clinical rotation, etc. off campus. So there's a few things that are talked about in here which dispel some of the commonly thought of misconceptions with CPT. So one is whether or not it's work or not work, paid or unpaid. So you'll see training is actually the word from both the title and the regulation, not work. So sometimes we're talking about work, but sometimes we're just talking about training. We'll talk about the difference between that in a little bit. You see that it talks about optional and required. I know sometimes there's a misconception that if it's required for your degree, you don't need to worry about it, but that's not actually true. Even required experiences do need to take CPT authorization. And then if you've done an F1 check-in with me or my colleagues, you know that I say anytime you see these words, internship, externship, practicum, clinical rotation, those should be little red flags in your head to think, oh, I might need CPT for this. So if you can just remember that, it'll help you know if CPT is needed. Now, when we're talking about this, we're really only talking about off-campus employment. So if you're doing any of these things on campus, it's considered on-campus employment. And then you're held to the normal rules of on-campus employment, which is no more than 20 hours per week. Okay? All right. Okay. So here's the eligibility. CPT is typically the work authorization that you receive while you're enrolled in your program. So we'll talk about OPT a little bit later. OPT is typically what you do after you complete your program, but CPT is what you're doing while you're here at NSU in your program. The eligibility and the regulations is that you must have been in full-time status for a minimum of 1 year before you're eligible for CPT. There are a few things that are specific considerations in here, though. If you were in a different status other than F1, so maybe you were on an H4 or an H1B, and you've maintained status and been enrolled, then you would still qualify for that 1 year. That time counts. Or maybe you were in J, that would also count. It does not have to be F1 status, but it does have to be a valid status, and you do have to be lawfully enrolled full-time for a minimum of a year. Okay. So there is an exception to this, and I can't remember if I get to it or not, so I'm going to go ahead and talk about it now. For graduate students, sometimes there's an exception to this rule, and that's when your program requires you to have CPT before then. So some of your programs may say you may take an internship, but you don't have to. Some of them may say you have to take it, but when you take it, it's up to you. Those would not qualify for this exception. But if your program says, yes, you have to take this internship and you have to do it this term, even if you're not eligible because you haven't met that 1 year, the regulations do allow for graduate students only to bypass this rule. Your academic program has to verify that this is required. So you can't just come in and say, yep, it's required, I need that exemption. Your academic program would have to verify that, yep, you do have to take it now and you're not ready for that. And, that requirement yet, okay? Undergraduate students, my apologies, it does not apply to you. There's no exception for undergrads. Undergrads, in every single case, you're going to have to go through the 1 year of eligibility. Okay, so taking a look at the regulation again, one of the things that we have the responsibility of doing is making sure that it meets this really critical part of being integral and a part of an established curriculum. And so the main way that we do this is obviously through course. So curricular usually means tied to a course. That's the main way that we authorize CPT in our office, is that a student is enrolled in a course, and with that course they're able to do an off-campus training experience. So that's where, again, those words come in. So the internship course, the externship course, the practicum course, the rotation course, those are how you can see those playing in where you're going to take that course, and because of that course, you get to have CPT authorization. Again, almost all of the CPT we authorize in at NSU is option 1. You're registered for a course, and because you're registered for that course, you have to have this experience.
Oh, I was going to ask.
Okay. Yeah. There is an option 2, and that is when you're required by the program to complete an experience that's not tied to a course. So for my undergraduate students in the room, did you both just start? You just started, so you're both under Excel requirements, right? You have to get Excel units to graduate. So this is a good example for yours. You have to get an Excel unit, you have to get 6 Excel units to graduate. Some of those Excel units aren't courses. So you might be able to do an Excel internship, for example, and there's no course to it. But because it's in the catalog that you have to get these units to graduate, we're able to authorize CPT without you being in a course as long as you go through the Excel internship pathway. So that's one example. Other examples are, I don't think there's anyone here, but in the law school, they're required to do a number of pro bono service hours. They don't take a class to do the pro bono service hours, but because their graduation requirements say, did you do this? If you didn't do it, you don't get to graduate. That's another example where we'll be able to authorize it without being in a course. Okay? That makes sense. Any questions about that piece? Very few programs have this in there. A lot of programs do have it required for the degree, but they put you in a course while you're doing it. All right. So one of the most common misconceptions is that it's not paid, so I don't need to have CPT authorization. So a 2012 memo from the Student Exchange Visitor Program states that payment is not a factor in determining if CPT is necessary. So they don't care if you're getting paid. What they care about what you're doing and where you're doing it, okay? And so obviously, if there's paid, that definitely needs CPT. You don't even have to ask the questions, but there are experiences that are unpaid that still require CPT. And that's, I think, where a lot of students have trouble because oftentimes they're not even called work. They're called training. But as you can see, it's curricular practical training, not curricular practical employment, and so that still is included under the regulation. Okay? So, what about volunteer work? Because that's usually what people ask next is I want to be involved in my community. NSU prides itself on being a community engaged institution. True volunteer work does not require CPT authorization. This area is gray. There's not a hard and fast way to tell yes it's volunteer or yes it's training, but usually it's going to be for civic, charitable, or humanitarian reasons. So you're doing this out of the goodness of your heart to help someone in these areas. It's usually at a nonprofit, and it's always volunteer work. So if you're there with 50 people and you're all volunteering, no one's getting paid for that. Like everyone who's doing it is doing the same. Where people get in trouble is like internships where you're doing the exact same thing. The person who's a full-time employee is doing, they're getting paid, but they're somehow talked you into doing it for free. That can't be called volunteer work because you're doing the same tasks and just not getting paid for it. Okay? So I know it can be a fine line as determining what it is, but we do have a way to help you determine that. And so if everyone picked up the decision chart, looks like this. If you didn't grab it, there's some in the back and there's some up here that you may grab. This is available on our website, and this is a way that you can help determine if CPT is necessary for whatever experience you're doing. So you'll notice the first one starts off with saying, is it for civic, charitable, or humanitarian reasons? Typically at a nonprofit, always unpaid. So be careful with the nonprofits because, of course, there are paid positions at nonprofits as well that would be required for CPT. Just because it's at a nonprofit doesn't necessarily mean you don't have to get authorization, but it's a good way to test it. If the answer is yes, you're going to immediately go down to the box that says CPT is probably not required. You'll note in our office, we will very rarely, if ever, tell you, no, CPT is definitely not required. And that's because ultimately you need to make the decision on whether or not you want to seek CPT authorization because you're going to be the one who faces the impact on it. So we've created this chart to help you understand, and we've given you kind of recommendations. But if you meet the requirements for CPT and you want us to authorize CPT, we will do so, okay? If you decide that you don't want to authorize CPT, as long as it's unpaid, we probably will not, flag you for any reason. You have to decide whether or not you want CPT authorization because it's your immigration status, okay? On the other side of the chart, the next question it says, is the experience on campus or off campus? So we've talked about that. On-campus employment typically does not require any CPT authorization. The only time you may seek CPT authorization for on-campus is if you want to go beyond the 20 hours that's required, that's limited for on-campus employment. So when we see this sometimes is if someone wants to take an unpaid internship at NSU, but they already have an on-campus job. If their on-campus job already has them working 20 hours a week, the only way that they could do this unpaid internship is if they were to get CPT authorization for it. Okay? So I'm not going to go through this whole chart, but you might find this to be very useful as you're considering your experiences and if you need CPT authorization or not. The considerations that we talk about on this chart when you're going to look at it is that whole notion of volunteer versus training, on or off campus. Compensation. Compensation is a more broad term than just I'm getting a paycheck. So it can include things like you're getting a stipend, you're getting free room and board. Those things could all be considered compensation and may trigger CPT. Tax forms are a dead giveaway. If someone wants you to fill out tax forms, you can know that means they consider it to be employment and so should you. Resume-worthy employment. So this may seem like a small detail and why do you need to care where I put it on my resume, but this is something that may come back to haunt students later if they're wanting to apply for an H-1B or permanent residency, because specifically for H-1B, you have to prove that you've got the training and experience to qualify you for the position that you're being sponsored for. And a lot of times the way you do that is show your resume. And so if you put something on your resume saying, oh, I gained this experience here, USCIS is going to go back to your F1 record, and they're going to look, did they have CPT authorization for this experience? If you did not, then they're going to say, well, you fell out of status because you did not get CPT authorization. So not only are we going to deny your H-1B, we're also going to hold you accountable for being out of status way back when that happened. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
Okay. And unfortunately, USCIS, SCBP, and other agencies are looking at things like LinkedIn profiles when they do these things. So it's they've got a lot of eyes out there that are looking. I've heard even someone who posted on Craigslist to be a babysitter was flagged by an agency and had their status denied. So they do have people out there looking. I know none of you would ever engage in employment without authorization, but just know you may get caught, okay? All right. Another line that you can use to determine if CPT is necessary is benefit to the employer. So this one is kind of helpful when you're thinking of things like shadowing. So a lot of jobs have shadowing opportunities. So think about if the person who you're shadowing is doing more work to help you, or if they're doing less work because you're doing it for them. If the answer is they're doing more work to show you and teach you how to do things, no CPT is necessary. That's shadowing. But if they're teaching you something and then not doing it anymore and you're taking over that workload for them, that's CPT. That's training. Okay? So those are some examples for you. Any questions about this chart at all? All right. So another important part of CPT is that it must be tied to your major of study as listed on your I-20. So this is that whole part about being curricular. It has to be related to what you're studying here at NSU. So sometimes we get questions about who decides if it's related. That's between you and the employer and your academic department. So the academic department is really a critical piece in CPT because they have to approve this to qualify to meet the needs of your internship course or your practicum course. So if they say that yes, this is appropriate for their major, then we would say that that's fine as well.
Can I ask you a quick question, slightly off? So when I got my I-20, it said information security and assurance. It changed twice since I've been here at NOMA.
The program name.
Right.
Yeah, so you're certainly able to check with us, but we have what's listed on your I-20 is based on a set list of major fields given to us by CBIS. So they're not always 100% congruent. It's not always exactly what's listed on your transcript is exactly what's listed on your I-20. So we're happy to take a look and make sure it's still the most appropriate title, but it's usually the case that it's the same even if the program has changed the name slightly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what if you're, because like I said, my complications management, that's a broad, kind of like a broad spectrum. So what, just for an example, what type of position you would think I'd be able to apply for, that they would consider?
So I really can't answer that because that's up to your academic department.
Okay.
So what I would suggest you do is talk to your program advisor and ask what kinds of experiences have been approved in the past.
Okay.
And you don't even have to ask for CPT, just ask for your major. So it could be an international student or a domestic student. What types of internships have people gotten credit in this program for before? And it's probably going to qualify for CPT. Good question. Okay.
I have a question about the whole 1 year with the I-20 academic year, like in the beginning you mentioned that.
The eligibility?
Yeah. What if you also took your undergrad here, but that was under a different I-20 and you essentially got a new I-20, but still under the same school? Would that still count, or would you have to start over again?
So it depends on how you did it. It's kind of nuanced, but if you did a transfer of your I-20, which means you have the same CVIS number, then you're fine. That's a continuation.
Okay.
If you left and we had to issue you a new I-20 with a new CVIS number with a new I-901 fee, that's a new status.
Okay.
So it starts over.
So you know, the CVIS number is still the same, but all the other information is different.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay.
Yeah, because that's a continuation of status. Good question.
I have a question. Like you said, if you work in the industry before and you find a CPT job that's unpaid and you decide to stay in NSU, but you want more hours, like 40 hours, will NSU get to pay you 40 hours or 20 hours?
So I think your question is, can you take a job that is more than 20 hours and get CPT authorization for it? Is that kind of the question?
Yeah, in NSU.
At NSU? It would only work if there's a course that you can take that would be appropriate for the job that you're doing. Because remember, first and foremost, it's curricular.
Curriculum.
So if you can find a course that says, yes, this new job that you've got at NSU meets the requirements, and NSU's fine with it in terms of your employer, then we would be able to authorize that. Okay?
I think she said, would she get paid for the
the
40
40
hours
hours.
instead of the 20?
Well, if you're working 40 hours, I mean, that's between you and your employer. Yeah. So as long as you, in theory, yes. Yeah, as long as they're fine. There's a piece that I'm going to get to in a little bit that might make it a little bit more tricky. So just give me 1 second and we can see if that adds to it. So you have to make it even more difficult for you all. All right. So here is something, and I got right to it. So it's authorized for a specific job title, a specific employer, a specific location, and a specific start and end date. Okay, so how many of you have had OPT before? Just one. So when you applied for OPT, did you already have a job?
No.
Right. And so for OPT, you apply, and then you start looking for jobs, and it doesn't matter if you have a job or not.
Right.
For CPT, the only way you get CPT is you already have that job offer, because again, it's curricular, and so you have to have a job that your academic department says yes to, and then we'll authorize it. If you don't have a job, your academic department's not going to say yes. If your academic department doesn't say yes, then we can't
But
authorize
then how
anything.
does that work because I can't work unless I'm authorized.
Mhm.
So how can I have the job first and then you guys not approve
So you
me?
get a job offer letter. So it's really important that you're communicating with us in advance to determine things like, what do you think this would meet their requirements? Am I eligible? Clear those things up first, and then you can start your search.
Okay.
Okay? The good news is that since you applied for OPT before, you knew it took like 90 days, right? It took a long time, and you had to
No,
pay
it
all
actually
kinds of
didn't take
money.
that long because I applied early.
Okay.
Yeah. So probably took maybe like 3 weeks to come in.
That's shocking.
But I was smart. I didn't put the start date until
Yeah.
like later on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So typically, OPTs are taking a long time right now, or up to 90 days, because you have to send it to USCIS, and of course, no job's going to hold, well, maybe some, but very few jobs are going to hold it for 90 days, right? Especially if it's like an internship, you don't have a degree you're wanting to get yet. The good news is CPT isn't done entirely in our office. So you don't have to wait for USCIS. All you have to do is drop off the paperwork, which we'll talk about in a little bit, to our office, which is right upstairs. You can also submit it online. And within 7 business days, we will be able to review it and approve it, and you can start working, okay? So that's how you can have a job offer without, having received authorization. So you get your job offer letter, communicate to your employer that, and that's pretty common. Like, even when I started a job, I wanted 2 weeks before I started working, right? So that's pretty common to say I need 2 weeks to get authorization. Okay? And there's no fee for CPT. All right? Okay. So this is the part that makes your question a little bit more tricky. So unless no course enrollment is required, and remember those are the very few examples like the Excel unit, the law school, everyone else has a course they have to take, CPT is only authorized 1 semester at a time. So what may be challenging with the situation you described is that you have to convince NSU, who wants to hire you, to allow you to do it for only 1 semester. Or maybe 1 semester at a time, but then you have to convince your program to let you have multiple CPT authorizations. So the number of times you can do CPT is determined entirely by your program, and each of your programs may be different. So some of your programs may say, we only allow students to do a total of 6 internship credits. Well, if you can only earn 6 internship credits, that means you can only do it for 2 semesters. And so if you can't enroll in an internship class, then you can't get CPT because it's academic first.
I want to ask a question concerning 6 credits. If they said 6 credits, will you have to, like it's attached to a course? Does that mean that you have to enroll for that course twice?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it does. Now, for undergraduate students, not a huge deal because you get your set number. You can go from 12 to 18, 19, I'm not sure exactly how many, and not pay a difference. For grad students, you're paying per credit hour, so of course that does make it more expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's just take a look at this authorization date. issue. So let's take this current semester as an example. So if we wanted to get CPT authorization fall 2018, our earliest start date would have been the first day of fall 2018 classes. For most programs, that was August 20th. So that would have been your start date for your CPT. You may not have CPT start date earlier than that if you're taking a fall class. For CPT, we authorize it as late as through the break that follows. So your last end date would be the day before winter 2019 starts, because we would authorize it through the break. The break ends for most programs January 6th, Sunday, January 6th, because classes start for winter Monday, January 7th. So if you did CPT in the fall, you'd have to be registered in a fall class, and the earliest you could start would be Monday, August 20th, the latest Sunday, January 6th. Okay? Same thing for winter, but of course there's a bonus because the break over summer is much longer than the break over winter. So the earliest start date is still going to be that first day of winter classes. Most programs, Monday, January 7th. The latest end date, though, is going to be the day before fall starts. So that's going to give you all the way through the summer term, and you're going to have until, I don't know exactly what it is, but we're using this year as an example, Sunday, August 19th. Okay? Does that make sense?
Which is when it has
For
to end.
winter?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Can you repeat that for winter?
Yes, so that was for winter. So for winter, you can do the beginning of the fall semester all the way through the last day of the summer term. So Monday, January 7th through Sunday, August 19th. So that's a bonus. You get more time because you get the term plus the break. So then the next question is usually, what? About summer. So summer is a time when a lot of people want to do internships because they're not necessarily in class. So if you're enrolled in a winter class, that's what we just talked about. You can already do it. You've already got you're taking your winter internship class. It started January 9th, and it goes all the way through August 19th, something like that. But if you did not take a class during winter, then you have to get CPT summer enrollment, and you have to pay for that summer class. Okay, even if your program does not require summer enrollment. So what that looks like are, if you took a winter 2019 class, so this is next term, your earliest start date again would be that first day of winter, and your latest end date would be the day before fall. So it's the exact same thing as when we talked about fall before. But if you did not take a winter internship class or CPT, the earliest start date is going to be the first day of summer 19. For most programs here, it's going to be something like, I don't know, Monday, May 5th or something like that. And then the last day would be that Sunday, August 19th. And you'd have to take a summer class and pay for it.
So you recommend winter to be the best. And the winter is just once, right? It's like 3 credits.
Yes. And then you can get all the way to the summer.
I was going to go with that.
Yeah.
Because, with the MBA course, we go like every 8 weeks.
Yep.
So we wouldn't have a job just for 8 weeks.
Right.
So it would be the whole.
Yes.
Okay.
This is our gift to you. Is that we decided CPT is different at every school, but we've tried to be as within the regulations, but also as international student friendly as possible, and so we authorize through the summer. Okay. Any other questions about this? All right. I think I need to find out where.
So if you don't, worst case scenario, if I don't, like if I were to apply for CPT for winter, January, and I do it all the way until school ends, which is May, but I want to continue, but I don't apply for CPT, I don't get a course, I don't enroll in a summer course.
You don't have to. So when you submit your winter registration, we will authorize it based on the job offer dates up to the end of summer. So as long as your job offer letter says January through August, we'll authorize it. January through August, you do not have to take a summer course.
So the authorization letter from the job, it has to say a start and end date?
Yes. Yeah. And we will use it within the scope of the regulation. So if you give me one that says, my start date is, January 1st and it goes until December 31st, I'll accept that job offer letter, but I'm not gonna authorize it through that. I'll authorize it through August because that's what I can do based on your course enrollment. Then if you take another class, you can use that same job offer letter again, because it already you can use it until December 31st. You'd have to get it extended a little bit if you want to go through next January, but, yeah. This is tricky stuff, so.
Yeah, I know.
And it's hard to wrap your head around. So full or part-time is a really important determination in CPT because there's an impact on OPT depending on what you do. So the good news is this is pretty easy to understand. Full-time CPT is always going to be anything that's more than 20 hours a week. Part-time CPT is anything that is 20 hours or less a week. So a lot of students say, well, I'm only doing a total of 80 hours over the whole semester. Well, then clearly that's going to be 20 hours or less a week. There's not a determination. You don't need to tell me like, oh, I'm doing 2.5 hours this week, 9 hours the next. If it's under 20 an average, that's what you get me. It's also based on what your job offer letter says. So if your employer writes 19 hours a week, I'm saying it's part-time. If your employer writes 21 hours a week, I'm saying it's full-time. Even if 1 week you don't work full-time, I still have to authorize it based on that job offer letter. Okay? All right?
What's the impact?
What's the impact?
So much excitement. All right, before we get to it. So quick reminder about OPT. This is the work authorization that's typically utilized by F1 students after they complete their program. And a lot of students don't want to jeopardize their option for this. And so that's why the full-time and part-time is super important. I don't even know where I'm supposed to click this on. I don't even know where the box is. All right. So the good news is that part-time CPT has no impact on OPT. So you can have as much as you want as long as it's curricular and you're registered for it, okay? So it doesn't matter if you have 1 day of part-time CPT, it doesn't matter if you have 900 days of part-time CPT, as long as you're eligible for it and authorized for it, no problem. It also doesn't matter if it's 2 hours a week or if it's 19 hours a week. As long as it's part-time, no impact. Here's the not as great news. Full-time CPT does have an impact on OPT. So each student is limited to a maximum of 364 days of full-time CPT at their degree level. As soon as they hit 365 days, your OPT is gone. Okay. So, let's break this down a little bit. That's only if you're working 20 hours a week, 21 hours a week or more, okay? For many students, they're not going to do that on CPT because first and foremost, you're studying, and this is usually like an internship, a practicum, some sort of experience like that. So it may look scary, but the majority of students don't even get any full-time authorization because that's just not the reason they're here. They're here to study and then they have this experience externally. But if you do have a program that allows for full-time CPT, you do need to keep an eye on this. The programs that we see the most problems with this are the healthcare fields where they're required to do rotations, clinicals, things like that. Some of them, they're part-time and we don't need to worry about it. But if you're in those full-time and they have to do a certain number of them, that's where we have to be careful. Okay? So as soon as, 1 day of full-time CPT, no problem. 100 days full-time CPT, no problem. Nothing happening with your OPT whatsoever. 364 days of full-time CPT, no problem. 365 days, gone. Okay? All right. So here's an important part of this too. We're not counting the actual days you're working. We're counting the days it's authorized. So if you told me that I'm going to work the entire fall semester, I start August 1st, and I'm going to go through winter break, and I'm going to be done January 6th, then we authorize however, let's say it's 200 days. That's what we authorize. Even if you only work 2 days in that entire time, we still authorized it for 100 days. Okay? And so that's what they're counting. All right? Does that make sense?
Can I have the question?
Of course.
If you're doing part-time, and probably after you enroll from January, let's say August, or winter 2019, from January and to August. Okay, so but your employment stays January to December, but you're doing part-time, okay? So in August you you ask for extension to December. Will it also?
It doesn't go back. It'll be a new authorization. And so you're saying the only full-time is when you go from August to December?
I just want to know, because if you're doing from January to August, or maybe by extension you were doing like January to December with part-time, will it still forfeit your OPT?
If it's part-time, it never has any impact whatsoever. Okay? And what I thought you were asking was, let's say I do part-time for the first authorization, I do get an extension, I do it again, and then I do full-time. Does it go back? No, it's just based on the date. We have to, it'll be listed on your I-20, and it'll say, from this date to this date, part-time. From this date to this date, full-time. We're only going to count those full-time days. Okay?
So, just quick clarity. So you're saying that if I do get a CPT from January, that full 12 months, part-time, it doesn't affect your OPT?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. Are we all good?
All good.
It's important, so I want to go over it as many times as necessary. And I think I want to make sure it's clear too that it's at the degree level, not necessarily degree. So is anyone doing a second bachelor's, a second master's, anything like that? Okay, so then you don't have to worry about it. But let's say you did one master's here at Nova, and then you're going to go do another one. We won't even have you transfer. Let's say you want to do a second master's at Nova. If you already had 360 days of full-time CPT during your first master's, and then you do an extra 4 or 5 days, even if you only did 5 days at your new degree, it's counting everything you do at the degree level. So when you go from master's to doctoral, it starts over again. At doctoral, you get a whole new pot of full-time CPT. But if you stay at the same level, that's it. Now, a lot of students who do 2 masters, they do their master's, they get CPT, they do OPT, and then they do a second master's. You can only have OPT at one level anyway. So if you don't have OPT to lose, there's really no harm in doing full-time CPT again. Does that make sense? Because you can't do master's OPT, master's OPT. You only get OPT at one level. So you could do master's OPT, master's with full-time CPT the whole time. And some students do make the
you have to
choice.
be registered in
Of course, yes, of course you do. Of course you do. Remember, your F1 visa is supposed to so that you can be here studying. There are employment options, but they make it difficult because they don't want that to be your main purpose here. Yeah. And some students do make the choice to forfeit their OPT because they figure, well, I'm in a 4-year program or a 2-year program. I can work full-time for 2 years or 4 years, but I only have 1 year of OPT. So it makes more sense for me to go ahead and say goodbye to my OPT and work and get paid for more years. Not very common. Not very common. The idea is that after you finish your degree, you're going to make more money, right? So a lot of students don't do that choice, but some do. All right. Okay. So another note on full-time CPT. The federal regulations do permit it even when you're enrolled. Of course, you have to be enrolled, right? But some of your academic programs will say no. Your primary reason to be here is to study, and we don't let anyone in our program do full-time, including our domestic students. And so if they say that, remember, it has to be curricular, so they have to sign off on it. If your program says no full-time CPT, then we do not give full-time CPT. All right? So there is a sheet that is 7 steps to apply for CPT. It's generic, so it hopefully applies to everyone, but because it's generic, it doesn't have a lot of super useful information, but it'll help you remember the process. So as we discussed, the first part is determining your eligibility. And we talked about what that means, being enrolled for at least 1 year, and for certain graduate programs, there may be an exception. Okay? The second step is to meet with your academic advisor. For some of the grad programs, they may call it program director. Whoever you talk to about what courses you're going to take, talk to that person and determine if there's an option for you to take CPT. Unfortunately, we see a lot of students who go and they find a great internship and then they go to their academic department and they say, no, there's no options for CPT. And so if you can't get in a course, then we can't authorize it, even if you have an exceptional opportunity. Okay? So after you make sure you're eligible, follow your academics department's process for receiving internship credit. So each of your academic departments may have a different process. It's pretty standardized at the undergraduate level, but at the graduate level, every program does it differently. So follow their process, and then only once you follow their process, then do you submit approval to our office. And so we do have, on our website, if you go to nova.edu, International Affairs, Office of International Students and Scholars is on the left-hand side, and then there's a section Documents and Forms. This is what it looks like. These are all of the resources there. So we have our decision chart, the 7 steps, but then you'll also find the actual applications, okay? You cannot start until you receive your CPT endorsed I-20, okay? So that's really, really important. And how long does it take to process?
7 days.
Exactly. So please don't come to my office and say, I got a great internship, I'm starting tomorrow, I'm so excited, because I'm going to say, oh, I'm sorry, honey, you are not starting tomorrow, we're starting in 7 business days, okay? I hate having those conversations, because then you're embarrassed because you have to go to your employer and say, I can't start, you need that. So please make sure it's 7 business days, all right? Stay at that current employer. Let's say you get a new promotion. They love you so much, they give you a new title. Do you have to get a new CPT? Yes, you do. Because again, when you apply for that H-1B later, they're going to look at your job title and they're going to say, were they authorized for that job title? Wow. And so new CPT authorization anytime you get a new title. Change jobs, change locations, anything like that. And if you want that extension, you want to take another CPT class, continue working, new authorization, okay? And make sure you submit it before 7 business days before you stop working. Otherwise, you're going to have to stop working, wait for it to be processed, and then start again. Your employer's not going to like that, okay?
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Okay. Maybe in fall, no, it ends in August.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe in fall you decided, oh, you're taking that, so you just want to continue, want to extend it.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean that you have to enroll? You have to enroll again?
Mm-hmm. Yes. All right, that's the end of the formal presentation. I know some of you have to get going. I'm here with questions. If you have any questions, I'll send this PowerPoint and these resources out. We have advising hours in our office Monday through Thursday, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m., 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. If you have any questions, our advisors there can help you as well. Thank you for coming.
Just clarity, I wasn't very clear on the tuition when you do get CPT. So, of course, you pay for those 3 credits with the CPT.
Mm-hmm.
I know in regulations that you have to be, as an international student, you have to be doing 2 courses.
Full time. It's different for every program, but for your program,
Yes,
yeah.
it's 2.
Yeah, so for CEC,
Right.
you have to be in 2 classes, so you'll still have to be in an additional 3 credits and pay for those 3
Wait, I
credits.
want to ask. Okay.
Oh, so I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry. So I have to have my 2 courses doing plus the CPT.
Not plus.
Oh,
So your
okay.
3 credits for CPT, it's like an internship class
Oh,
that
okay.
counts towards the ones you have to take. And the
Oh.
good news is that even though it may be off-site, most NSU, most internship classes are considered face-to-face. So you could do, for example, if you're only required to be in 2 classes, some of you are required to be in 3, but if you're only required to be in 2 classes, you could do your internship class and an online class
Okay.
and meet the regulations. For those of you who are required to be in 3 classes or more, undergrad students, you'd have to still meet the face-to-face hands-on, requirements.
Quick question. I'm sorry. You can go first. You want to
No,
go?
she answered it first.
Okay.
All right. So in summer where you don't have to do classes.
In the summer, you don't, but you still
Okay.
have to have authorization for CPT. So you either got that through the winter authorization.
Right.
If you did not have it, then you do have to be in a summer class.
Okay.
You don't have to be in 2 summer classes, though. You can be in just the 1 CPT class.
Okay.
Good question. What else?
But since you already have enrolled for the
For winter, you're good. You're golden.
Yeah.
You're good. As long as your original authorization was through the summer, yep, you're good.
And we can change it then to full-time. The CPT, it has to maintain the standard of 20 hours.
Okay, that's a good question. So let's say you got part-time in the winter, and then starting in May, because you weren't in classes anymore, they allowed you to do full-time. If you already had it authorized for part-time, come to us. we'll go ahead and just change it for moving forward to full-time, so that you
Would she
have
need,
both of this.
would she need to bring in another, letter to say,
Yeah, you would have to get an updated letter from them to say that.
Thank you.
Thank you, yes, thank you. But you guys had the best questions of anyone that's ever had to do this.
Thank you.
My final question would be, given that I'm currently already enrolled in my classes,
Mhm.
I'm not sure whether they have CPT or not, I didn't ask. But if I didn't, then I was going to have to wait till next semester and get a CPT class in order
Yes, remind me what program you're in?
MBA?
MBA. So the earliest you'd be able to do this would be fall 2. Winter, yeah, fall 2. And so if there's a fall 2 course that you could take, then you could get it authorized through the end, like beginning of January. Yeah. But otherwise, yes, then you have to wait till winter 1.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Thank you. Thank you. Did you sign in?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. I'm just gonna stop the recording real quick. So did this whole thing less confusing or more confusing? Be honest.
close?
Both, yeah.
Yeah,
That happens. Any other questions?
I'm an Unpaid student, right?
Mhm.
And I want to, in the future, I want to enroll in B&B.
Okay.
So, what I resume builder, sometimes usually students do this dental shadowing.
Okay.
Would it require like CPT?
For shadowing?
Yeah.
Usually,
Because it says that your academic advisor need to authorize that, but why would he authorize
Right.
it for my other?
so use the chart. So again, I probably would not tell you yes or no. I would let you make the decision. But I think in, most situations when students have the opportunity to shadow, they do not get authorization, and that's perfectly fine.
Okay, so regarding shadowing, I can be sure that it doesn't require this assessment, tax form.
Right.
Or nor he is get benefited for another thing.
Right.
He is not going to
Right.
He's not going to give them compensation.
Yes.
I'm just worried about here, like there is no employment opportunities after shadowing, obviously.
Mhm.
But I need to put it on my resume where I was giving it in there. Like
Yeah.
I have experience like this.
Right, but you would list it as shadowing, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Exactly,
definitely,
and
yeah.
so I think that would be perfectly fine.
Right,
Mhm.
so it doesn't require.
Right. That would be my thought on it, but ultimately you need to decide, but I don't think that you would ever need it for that.
Okay, because he is not gonna pay me, I'm not gonna.
And he's gonna do more work to
Yeah,
explain
and
things to
even if it is
you.
like that I have to be sitting in the waiting area, he will be asking the patient
Mhm.
that he is gonna see you while I'm treating the patient, and if the patient's alive, I have to just stand there, see,
Yeah.
and just go back to my.
Well, and think of it this way, let's say you want to get an H-1B later, and they say, tell me why you're qualified. You're not gonna say, well, I watched those doctors do that stuff, I know how to do things now, right? Like, that's not gonna be one of the things that qualifies you for the job. You're gonna say, when I had a rotation, I did this. There's the difference. It's like, yeah, you may gain knowledge, but that's, just practical education.
Yeah,
So,
I'm just getting the knowledge for the healthcare field, I'm
Right.
not authorized to do it. For
Exactly.
that, I may require assisting and all that.
exactly. Yeah,
Stuff.
yeah.
And the other thing I'm confused about, currently I'm doing, I've been starting on the job at Tech
Okay.
in doing this right. And if I want to get in for CPT, my job hours should be less than 20 hours per week.
For CPT for RECWA or CPT for something else?
No.
Like you
I'm
wanna
in
get a-
public health, and the
Okay.
regular, it's my on-campus job. And it's-
So the only way your public health CPT would ever have anything to do with RECWA is if it was on campus. So, public health, I don't know, do they have an on-site clinic at all that they use?
No.
So like I know like Marriage and Family Therapy, they have like a behavioral clinic here on campus. That's where we have to authorize CPT, even though it's unpaid, even though it's on campus, because if a student's working at RECWA, they can't do more on campus. They already maxed their RECWA hours, and then we do have CPT. But as long as it's off campus, it has no impact on your RECWA job whatsoever. So wait until you get the job, and then come back and talk to us if you still have questions. It makes it easier when you have an actual experience that we can
Yeah,
kind of talk
definitely.
through.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I think I'm good to go with the dental shadowing.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
Thank you.
Did you have any questions, Ashley?
Yeah, okay, I started in January.
Mhm.
So this would be the end, this semester would be the end of my full year.
Exactly.
Okay, so so it would be best to look for jobs now or maybe towards the end.
To start in January.
Right.
Mhm.
So
But make sure you talk to your academic program.
right, because
Your management.
yeah, the management for classes, have to have to enroll in classes by October. That's when,
Registration opens.
right, registration.
So do you work with Christy? Who's your advisor?
Christy.
Yeah, just
Mhm.
talk to her and make sure, like, is there a CPT course available in winter one? If
Mhm.
so, then register for that, look for classes. Or sorry, look for jobs, and then once you get that job offer, then you would turn in the application to us. Okay? I know it's overwhelming.
It-
International students are the most amazing people ever because they have to understand all of these rules
Mhm.
without them being clear.
Do you guys have a workshop for like, because at my old school, I went to the university in Boca. We had workshops for like the whole, H1B and,
Yeah, during International Education Week, we bring in a lawyer who talks about H-1Bs and other employment. Yeah, like permanent residency, EB-1s, EB-2s, all of that. Yeah, so, and he always records it, so we'll have that available too.
when,
It's November, his presentation is on Thursday, November 15th at noon in the Knight Auditorium in DeSantis.
okay.
Yeah, it's not been published yet because right now we're still finalizing
Right.
International Education Week, but yes.
And, the
I'll put
great,
it in the email when I send out the
the
follow-up.
great part about CPT is we can take a whole year like the part-time CPT and not having impact on OPT, right? That's
Yep,
the
no
good part.
worries. As long as your academic program says, yes, they can be in CPT, we'll do it.
Yeah, and it's better that we enroll in part-time if possible.
It is just because it just raises fewer kind of flags. I think anytime there's full-time CPT, if you're doing something later like H-1B, USCIS is going to take an extra fine look at your application, make sure you were eligible, make sure their job was right, all that. Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, we're in a climate where it seems to me that the governmental agencies do everything they can to prevent you from getting your benefits, whereas in our office, we do everything we can to see if it's possible for you to have it,
Yeah.
So, while keeping you safe at the same time.
Right.
All right, guys.
With
Have a good night.
with the full-time, if I were to do the full-time, right, would that affect, if later on down the road, if I were to apply for, permanent residency?
Only if you did 300, well, it never should. But I could see them taking an extra fine look if you did more than 364 days, just to make sure. You'd have to make the argument, as to why you did it and prove that you were here with the intent to study, not work. In theory, it shouldn't be a problem, but unfortunately, the way the adjudicators are looking at things now, it shouldn't be a problem, but I can't tell you for certain that they wouldn't look at it.
Are there
It's just a whole new climate now. I mean, that's the thing.
right, I know. So the lawyers that you guys bring in, are they familiar with these whole processes
Yes.
to say whether or
Yes,
not?
he's brilliant. He's so awesome. I'm going to be out of town most of that week, and I made sure and scheduled his presentation when I could be there because I learn something every single time I hear him.
That's good.
He's so good, and he's kind. Similar to our office. Like the goal is to help you guys as opposed to like find ways to hurt you guys because his wife is an immigrant too, and so like he's good.
Okay.
And Fragaman is the #1 immigration agency in the world.
Okay.
So yeah. So stay tuned. I'll put a little save the date when I send the follow-up
Yes,
email.
all right. Thank
Okay?
you so much.
All right. Have a good one.
You too.